2007, there I was sitting in Guangzhou in southern China, and I'd gone over with 6 students of mine who I had been teaching in Dublin, and they were doing herbal medicine in the university hospital where I had gone about 10 years previously to learn my Chinese medicine, or to some of my Chinese medicine. So therefore, here I was in Guangzhou with time on my hands. So I thought, well, in which case, let's write a book, as you do. So therefore, obviously with all things, often starting off is the hardest part. So therefore, it's a funny thing, health was the opening line and is still the opening line. So therefore, after a number of attempts at the book, it sat around disused and unloved on various laptops for many years. And then we got to a certain point where I was thinking, well, actually, it's a bit silly to have done so much of the book and not actually really got to the point where it could actually be exposed to the general public and hopefully of use for years and years to come. So therefore, I approached a number of other publishers and they said, well, yes, it's not quite done yet. You've got to try and do this and try and do that. And then I was told, well, maybe I did what most first-time authors did and tried to put it all into one book, and maybe I should write 2 or 3 books. So I kind of hit a bit of a brick wall. So therefore, out of the blue, I received this email saying that would I be interested in writing a book on tongue and pulse diagnosis? So I said, well, yes, I'd be quite interested in writing a book on tongue and pulse diagnosis, which are 2 of the main planks of Chinese medicine diagnostic techniques. But I did mention that I'd done 80,000 words of my own book. So they said, well, that's very interesting. If you want to send us the first chapter, we'll have a look. So I duly sent them the first chapter over, and then I got this email saying, yeah, we're going out of the country for a bit. We'll get back in touch when we come back. I thought, well, that's the last I've heard of them. However, as good as they were to their word, lo and behold, they came back, and we arranged a meeting. And after about 10 minutes, Ollie said, we'd like to publish your book. I said, you're joking. And I said, no. I said, you're not serious. And I said, you are. I said, you're pulling my leg. I said, no. So there we were, and here it is. Author, this is all completely new to me. So therefore, I received the email and didn't really do very much because the date was months away when it had to be kind of sent out to the final version, edit, print thing. So therefore, after a certain amount of while, so it turned into like autumn of last year, and I said, well, I'd like to have pictures in it. And they said, oh, well, you're responsible for that. Okay. So I said, well, where do I get the pictures from? And they said, well, try go on the internet. So I went on the internet and I was gathering all these lovely pictures, and they said, well, you've got to make sure they're copyright free. I thought, okay. So therefore, I then managed to rummage around on these kind of weird, peculiar sites and get the pictures that I thought were really nice and bright and colourful. And then they said, well, they've got to be black and white. I thought, oh, really? So therefore, last Christmas, I kind of sat around at home and didn't really do anything at all. And then, come January, I came back to London and saw my friend Sarah, who's over there. Hi, Sarah. And I said, well, I need to get these things done for the book. She goes, well, I've got this great friend called Liam. Never met him, but he's done great work for me in the past. I said, oh, lovely. So she goes, well, I'll put you in touch. So Julie, we got put in touch with Liam. So Liam, therefore, said, yes, Steve, I'd love to help. That's absolutely great. And then about 2 days later, she goes, well, Steve, I'm really sorry, but college has put a whole lot more work on me and I can't actually do it. But I've got a friend called Jessie. I thought, oh, fantastic. So it's getting quite surreal by this point. I'm thinking, well, I've never met Liam, and I've certainly never met Jessie. So I got in touch with Jessie and we had a quick Skype conversation. Here she is, sitting there. Lovely, wonderful. So I said, well, to Jessie, I said, well, tell me a bit about yourself. So she goes, well, she did a degree in music at Manchester, I believe, in flautistry, i.e. not doing flowers, but playing the flute. And then after that, she moved into natural progression and became a tattoo artist. So therefore, we have Jessie to thank for the wonderful line drawings that she's done for the chapter on herbs, particularly all her own work, and they're absolutely glorious, which added incredibly to the visual appeal of the books. If you just have word after word after word, it can get a little bit tedious and a bit hard to really focus on. So also it's quite handy because when you see a picture, that's where the actual words begin as well. So that's quite a useful thing. So the strap line for the book was a book to read and a book to refer to. So the aim of it is that you can read it as a book, and hopefully people have read it and will read it as a book for certain aspects of it. There's 9 chapters, so therefore the first chapter is an introduction to life, the universe and everything, and explains about how wonderful Western medicine is at certain times, and unfortunately how sometimes it doesn't quite cover all the bases at other times. So therefore it introduces the concept of energetic medicine. So therefore energetic medicine has been used for at least 2,000 years and debatably 3,000 to 4,000 years. It manifests through traditions such as traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine from the Indian subcontinent, and humoral medicine, which was a dominant medical philosophy in this country up until about the time of Harvey, which was, 16th, 17th century. energetic medicine is by definition very naturalistic. So when you feel hot, you tend to stretch out. When you feel cold, you tend to contract. And therefore, this was one understanding of health and disease, which is different to biomedicine. Both are valid, both are useful, and both can complement each other very well if they're used in the right aspect and right places. So therefore, lo and behold, Jessie was as good as her word and came up with the pictures that were needed for the book, which was fantastic. So therefore, that was good. So therefore, I was thinking, okay, so what should I put on the back of the book? Now, I had one of my friends who said to me that realistically, having a celebrity endorsement is a good idea. So I thought, well, I don't really know any celebrities, so that's a bit of a challenge. So therefore, my very good friend and colleague, Dr. Eric Asher, who we used to work at the Third Space Medicine, which was London's leading integrated medical centre for 17 years. We worked in tandem there. He's a very wonderful GP and a homeopath. He wrote one piece for the back. Professor Song Ke, who was one of my original Chinese medicine teachers, again wrote a very nice piece. And so I was thinking about the third person to have on the back of the book, and I thought I'd go for one of my other Chinese teachers, but unfortunately he said, yes, Steve, no problem at all, we'll do that. And I sent him down a draft of it. He says, I can't do it. I said, why not? He goes, it's got homeopathy in it. It's always kind of raised hackles and made people feel slightly uncomfortable, even in the world of Chinese medicine as much as the world of orthodox science and biomedicine. So therefore I was thinking, oh dear, who do I get for the third person to write it on the back? I thought, well, you know, two would be good enough really. But then out of the blue, I got a message from my friend who was one of my students called Jodie. So she's going, oh, Steve, where do you get these pills from? I hadn't heard of her for months, for years, literally years. I said, oh, well, I get these pills from there. She goes, well, how's your family? I said, family's very well, thank you. I said, how's your family? She goes, very well, thanks. I said, how's Brett? She goes, Brett's very well. I said, do you think Brett would like to do a little bit of a piece for the back of my book? She goes, I'm sure he'd love to. So Brett is the lead singer of Suede, which is probably the closest thing I know to a celebrity. So therefore, this is the endorsements on the back. So a book to read and a book to refer to. We've got 9 chapters in the book. 9 is the greater yang number, 6 is the greater yin number in Chinese medicine. Health in Theory and Practice is, of course, in some ways a slight homage to someone that did write a book called Magic in Theory and Practice. But if you don't know who that is, then you don't need to worry about it. Circling the Square, the subtitle comes from the concept that in Chinese cosmology, the circle relates to heaven and the square relates to earth. And so therefore, circling the square means uniting heaven and earth through your own personal existence. So therefore, this is the way to bring down fire from heaven and to bring up coolness from earth and to mix them in your energetic being. In Ayurvedic medicine, you have chakras, so the 7 chakras in Ayurveda. In Chinese medicine, I think it's called dantians. Dantian means red field or cinnabar field. There's one here, there's one here, and there's one here. So therefore, for everyday living, you need your qi to be here in your lower dantian. So therefore, this is one of the ways that you can help to enhance your life. You can help it to maintain your health, regain your health, maximise your health, maximise your lifespan, enhance your intellect, and basically lead the full and capable life that all of us deserve to lead. He who pays the piper calls the tune. Why is anyone surprised when drug companies do not release data from trials they have funded if it is not in their best interests? Why was there any surprise that Facebook information had been sold to election consultancy firms? Did you really think that Facebook is just a nice philanthropic company dedicated to keeping you in touch with your friends? Google's business model, charmingly called surveillance capitalism, trawls your data and sells it to the highest bidder to target you to sell you goods you don't need at a price you can't afford. So therefore, this is kind of like the basic starting point of where we're coming from. So therefore, the first chapter is an introduction which introduces the joys and some of the pitfalls of orthodox medicine. Iatrogenic disease. Iatrogenic is a Greek word which means disease induced by treatment received from the medical profession. In the States, is regarded as being the 3rd biggest killer of all Americans. Heart disease, cancer vie for number 1 and number 2. Number 3 is usually regarded as being iatrogenic disease. So whilst orthodox modern medicine has been fantastic, for instance, if you have type 1 diabetes, you need to inject insulin or you will die. You must have a pragmatic approach to life. However, for other things which may not be quite as binary as that, then there are things that you can do to help yourself to get better, to stay better, and to progress and develop as an individual. So therefore, the second chapter covers diet. Diet is basically, there's 4 pillars. The 4 pillars are diet, exercise, positive thinking, and treatment when you need it. So therefore, diet, what you put into your body obviously affects how you function. If you pulled up into the car, into your petrol station, and tried to put coal into your car, it wouldn't go very well, because coal's not really the best thing to put into cars. It doesn't really work. So therefore, if you come out of here and go to McDonald's too often, then you're probably not going to be functioning quite as well as if you didn't necessarily choose that. Life is about choices. So therefore, if you want to have a McDonald's every now and again and you like that, that's absolutely fine. Having 3 a day, as was evinced by the program Supersize Me, is probably not the wisest health choice. So therefore, we have a chapter on diet. So this is the chapter which is more technical as such. So it's got a whole list of information about minerals, vitamins, what the recommended daily amount should be, as well as an energetic approach to medicine. So foods have a certain nature. So obviously something that's hot, like ginger or chilies, is hot, and things that are cool, like mint or cucumber, are cool. So therefore, if you have a hot condition, you need a cool treatment. If you have a cool condition, you need a warm treatment. The idea is about balance, trying to keep balance as much as possible. So that's chapter 2. Chapter 3 is about exercise. There's a short sentence just before each chapter. So, those who do not find time for exercise will have to find time for illness. So therefore, it's important to keep yourself as physically fluid and mobile as possible, because this is all part of the process. And then we move on to the chapter on positive thinking. Now, whatever you feel most resonates with you as a belief structure is absolutely fine. You know, the final concept is in chapter 9, is about being fundamentally anti-fundamentalist. So therefore, if people are fundamentalists and they know that their way is the right way for everyone in the world, then I don't agree. So positive thinking, we can complain because rose bushes have thorns, or rejoice because thorns have roses. So therefore, positive thinking, it is based upon breathing techniques. Abdominal breathing is a very important process. One of the another lovely pictures here that Jessie did is a picture of a mountain, and it says, climbing up only without asking how high the mountain is. So therefore, you don't need to know where you're trying to attain, you just need to persevere. You keep trying to do the right thing. No one's perfect. We all have good days and bad days. The most important thing is not to beat yourself up. There's enough people out there in the world who will beat you up, so therefore it's pointless to do it yourself. So therefore, if you choose to do certain things, enjoy doing them. If you don't enjoy doing them, don't do it. So positive thinking explains about breathing techniques, and explains about certain acupuncture points. Obviously, I practice Chinese medicine, so therefore there are acupuncture points which are helpful for a variety of things, which again is gone through more in the chapter on acupressure. So then we move on to herbal medicine. Now, obviously, being a herbalist, I've been practicing since 1985, so that's 34 years currently of clinical practice. The more you practice, the better you get. So I'm better now than I was 34 years ago, and I'll probably be better tomorrow than I am now. You can only get what you get. So the art of healing comes from nature and not from the physician. This is what Paracelsus said. So in the Herbal Medicine book, we've got a brief introduction to the energetic traditions I mentioned earlier, being Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, and humoral medicine. And then we've got the beautifully drawn 64 herbs, which explains a little bit about what they're used for, and also has some interesting concepts. So for instance, there's a herb called gossicola, which is from the Indian subcontinent, called Centella asiatica or hydrocotyloidans. It was used for leprosy, and it's still used to heal wounds. Professor Li Chung Yun, who apparently lived for 256 years, this Chinese person, he was born in 1677 and died in 1933. Now that's a pretty good lifespan, if you ask me. That's placed great emphasis on gossicola and ginseng as herbs of prime importance for remarkable longevity. Now, obviously, as you kind of click up the miles through your life, longevity becomes slightly more interesting as each day passes by. So there's that, and there's just some nice small anecdotes on it. And then we come to the chapter on homeopathy. Now, as mentioned, my beloved deceased mother was a homeopath, so I was brought up with homeopathy. Homeopathy works by the concept that you have a life force. Right. Now, whatever you want to call your life force, it doesn't matter. You can call it your spirit, your chi, your vitality, your prana. It's a thing that makes you you and which is not in your being when you die. It's the part that leaves you when you... So the millisecond before you die and the millisecond after you die, your body's basically the same, but something isn't there. Whatever you want to call that, that's fine. but that's your life force. So therefore, the concept of homeopathy is that because there's different levels of existence, what's very powerful on one level is very weak on another level, and what's very weak on one level is very powerful on the other level. So, bearing in mind that from a homeopathic point of view, the concept of disease is because your life force malfunctions, then manifests down into physical reality as symptoms. If you manipulate the life force, then it means that you can treat the physical symptoms get better. The way you do this, empowering the medicines, is by a process of dilution and suppression. So you dilute it and you shake it. Homeopathy works for some people at some times. All medicines work for some people at some times. Homeopathy has been used in a number of trials for a variety of things. I appreciate the fact that obviously it's very easy to diss homeopathy because of the fact that if you analyse it, there's nothing left. There's something called Avogadro's number, which is 6 times 10 to the 27, and if you dilute things past that point, there are no molecules left. So it's a non-molecular form of treatment. In some ways, if your life force is clouded, then homeopathy probably is likely to work less well than if it isn't. Finally, chapter 7, we're moving on to acupressure and massage. So therefore, again, touch was the first thing that people ever did before they started sticking pins in people, before they started to make up herbs, before they started to potentize things. Touch is of real importance. So therefore, we have a variety of points mentioned here, which are for a variety of things. So for instance, moving back to our favourite topic of longevity, there's a point which is just below your knee. You probably can't see it on the camera, but there you go. There's one there. So this is, from here to here is regarded as being 3 chun. Chun's a Chinese word for inch. So your 4 fingers, each is unique to you as a person, is regarded as being 3 chun. So if you put it below your kneecap, and put it onto your leg, and then the bone at the front is your tibia. So if you measure 1 finger's breadth over from that point there on your leg, right? This is called Zhu San Li, stomach 36. Zhu San Li, Zhu means leg, San Li means 3 miles. So the name for this point came from the fact that if you've been working in the paddy fields for 15 hours in the bitter cold of northern China in winter, and you're completely exhausted, if you warmed up that point, it gave you the energy to walk your 3 miles home. So therefore, this is the point that helps. So if you warm it up, so in acupuncture, there's stuff called moxa, which is a herb called Artemisia, which you set fire to and you waft over the points. Now, originally Chinese medicine, came from shamanism and spiritual medicine, where the original cause of disease was due to evil spirits or displeasure of your ancestors. So therefore, originally they used to use moxa as a form and incantations before they started to use herbs and acupuncture. However, because the number of people increased, and therefore people start to live in closer communities to each other, you then start to get endemic diseases. Things like measles wiped out swathes of the population in Chinese history. The next point for making you live for a long time, now I do it with I blow dry my hair, I must admit to that. However, that means I've got a hairdryer. So having a hairdryer means that once I've had my bath, I warm up this point on my leg, and this point here, again, 4 fingers below your belly button, right in the middle. It's called Guan Yuan, Ren 4. So warming these 2 points up, you can do it with a cigarette, you can do it with a cigar, you can do it with a hairdryer, you can do it with moxa, whatever you want, but just warming them up on a regular basis is reputed to help you maximise your lifespan. Of course, as the Chinese always say, no one knows how long you're going to live, so it's a bit of a hard one to quantify. Unless you live like Li Chung for 267 years, in which case I think we can agree that's quite a good Floyd. So okay, then after chapter 7 we move on to chapter 8. Chapter 8 is the common ailments chapter. So therefore, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, your baby's screaming in the house, you think, oh God, what am I going to do? So you grab the book, you open the book, you think, sore throat, tonsillitis, okay, sage, where's the sage? Belladonna, okay, belladonna, or you can press this point here. So therefore it tells you different options that you can use depending on what you feel most comfortable with and what you have kind of nearby to hand for treating common conditions. And then, of course, we move on to the apocryphal chapter 9, A Day in the Life. So this is basically kind of like a slight critique of the world we live in. So, for instance, one of the things it says, okay, so if you go like this, you go like that, you go like this, and go, I feel really happy. Somehow it's just not quite incongruous. Whereas if you go like this and stand back and say, I feel really sad. So therefore your posture has a big effect upon how you feel, and how you feel can have effect upon your posture. So therefore we then move on and radiators and drains. Some people in this life radiate positivity. Some people, they look a bit like vampires. They may not be dressed in a black coat and look like Bela Lugosi, but I'm sure you've met some of them. When you come into the room, they just go, "Oh, hello, how are you?" And you think, "Oh, God, what are they doing?" You think, "Oh, I feel really tired." And they bounce you along, feeling really happy, and then you're going, "Oh, well, bye then." So then we move on to ritual. Obviously, in the wonderful scientific, energetic world that we live in, religion and ritual is kind of, again, slightly being ridiculed because, realistically, we know all about it. We've got technology, we've got the internet, we've got electron microscopes, we can do gene bending and editing and telomeres, all this wonderful stuff. And, if you believe in something spiritual, then you're a bit of a dork. Well, okay, fair enough. If you believe that, then that's totally your prerogative. There's something fascinating about science. One gets such wholesale returns of conjecture at such a trifling investment of fact. From Mark Twain. And from Richard Feynman, who's the Nobel Prize winner, a philosopher once said, "It is necessary for the very existence of science that the same conditions always produce the same result." Well, they don't. So, and also, unfortunately, if we do look at the wonderful world scientific, there are certain aspects of it which don't particularly resonate particularly well. Another interesting point, not wishing to completely ruin the book, but there's a chapter, a point called Gravitational Challenges. This was actually a paper in the BMJ, and it shows that some medics still have a great sense of humour. So therefore, this is about evidence-based medicine. I'm sure you've heard this phrase, evidence-based medicine. Evidence-based medicine, basically speaking, means that the medical profession are supposed to use medicine that's proven to work. If you look at, I went to a conference recently, they looked at 3,000 NHS interventions. Guess what the percentage was? It was evidence-based out of those 3,000 interventions, 11%. So that means that, if you put it the other way around, 89% of everything that the medical profession does is not actually evidence-based at the highest level. It's called Hazardous Journeys, Parachute Used to Prevent Death and Major Trauma Related to Gravitational Challenge, Systemic Review of Randomised Controlled Trials. So basically what they're saying was that everybody thinks that if you fall from a high place, like a plane, then a parachute is a good thing. It means you probably won't die. However, no one's actually checked this out to be a fact. So therefore, some people fall out of planes and live. They fall into a haystack or into deep snow or maybe the sea or something like this. So therefore, it's not an evidence-proven fact. So therefore, the methodology was suggested that all the people who really advocate evidence-based medicine should all go up in a plane. They should all be given identical packs. 50% will have a parachute in, 50% won't, and they should all jump out the plane.
What do you think of the Bach flower images?
Edward Batch was kind of a pretty inspirational chap. I think that they are very useful for subtle differentiation. So instead of just being depressed, he broke it into melancholia or sadness or lots of different mental states, which most other forms of medicine just tend to lump as you're depressed or you're anxious or you're someplace. So he broke it down to very different things. I think that they are very useful in the correct place at the right time again. I think it depends how toxic you are to start off with, really. I think detoxification is probably a very useful process, and fasting, again, is a very useful process to kind of reset your immune system, particularly in your at a cellular level. So I think that for the right individual at the right time, it's great. Particularly with Chinese medicine, they have 5 elements. So you've got wood, fire, earth, metal, and water, right? So therefore, autumn time is lung time. So therefore, this is associated with metal, I hope. On camera, I've got to be right, haven't I? So therefore, basically speaking, obviously autumn time, we're leading up to winter. Obviously, I did notice the other day as I was sitting on the bus coming into work, there's a lot of people going, oh God, here we go, it's starting. So therefore, there's wonderful things that you can do. There's a fantastic herb called astragalus. Astragalus is called milk vetch, it's a vetch. It increases your white blood cell count, and it works very well. There's a formula from Chinese medicine called Jade Wind Screen Formula. Now, the reason why they called it this was because of the fact that from a Chinese medicine point of view, you've got a defensive barrier about this far away from your body, and there's 6 external evils that can invade your body and make you sick. You get sick for 2 reasons. Either external things invade your body and make you sick, or you generate disease internally. So therefore, wind is always present so wind heat can blow in, wind cold can blow in, wind and damp can blow in, wind and dryness can blow in, particularly through the back of your neck here. So therefore, this is why if it's windy, it's a good idea to keep the back of your neck covered up, to have a collar or wear a scarf. If you're a woman and you're menstruating and it's windy, definitely keep the back of your neck covered up, because when you menstruate, you lose chi and blood, and therefore your defensive barrier is a bit weaker. So therefore, the defensive barrier is generated by the lungs, and astragalus is the main herb in this formula that strengthens your defensive barrier. So I noticed that apparently the figures for the flu vaccine that I saw, I think it might have been 2017, 2018, they suggested that across the board, the flu vaccine was 15% effective. Yes, sir. Excellent. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole variety of things. I mean, garlic is fantastic. Manuka honey. This is kind of crossing over into where your food can be your medicine and your medicine can be your food. So therefore, people did say sometimes that people dig their graves with their teeth.
Also, I've been in chronic pain for years. What do you think is the best herb for chronic pain?
Well, it depends a little bit as to the reason behind why you're getting the chronic pain. I mean, obviously, recently, CBD oils got a lot of press publicity. Did you? Well, there's the thing is, again, I went to a conference recently. There's lots of different kind of CBD oils and concentrations, and it varies quite dramatically in cost. It can cost up to like 200 quid for like 5 mils or something, or some of the different sorts. So you have to find out what the different in cannabis, you've got THC, which is the part that gets you high, and you've got CBD, which is cannabinoids. And then you have terpenes as well. So these are different chemicals in the plant. So in this country, it's illegal to have more than 0.4% THC in any product. I think if you get it from Guernsey, you can go up to like 3% or whatever. So therefore, the problem is, particularly with the kids who've got the epilepsy, they're getting full spectrum cannabis oil, which has THC in it as well. Whereas in this country, even though they say they now legalise it, you can't. The medical profession just don't know how to do it. So that's one possibility. Another possibility is looking at, see how your lifestyle is. Certainly things like, refined carbohydrates, white flour is a bit of a bitch, really. It's not exactly great. So depending on how your pain manifests and where it is, there's things that you can take. Interestingly, again, I was at a conference at the weekend, and they did a trial on acupuncture, and basically speaking, they compared different forms of pain management. And acupuncture, clinically proven, is about as effective as non-specific anti-inflammatory drugs like naproxen and these kind of anti-inflammatory drugs, and things like paracetamol and aspirin. And the only thing that stood out as being far superior to any other form of pain management was opiates. Now, the problem is, of course, that obviously taking opiates, one has a bit of a problem because you get addicted. So, swings and roundabouts.
I mentioned everyone today has forgotten about spiritual power. Spiritual healing can cure a whole lot of illnesses. You won't hear a word about it anywhere. The whole world has gone basic, materialist, and greedy.
I couldn't agree more, sir. If you look at chapter 4 in the book, then that should hopefully give you a bit of a starting place. I couldn't agree more. As I was mentioned earlier, the rampant, overbearingness of materiality and, the commercial world that they want us to live in, tramples all over people's spirits, souls and psyches, and then they wonder why they get sick. Most people wash their physical bodies most days. A lot of people haven't even got any conception of how to wash your physical, your emotional, psychic, spiritual body, and that's equally part of the process and is covered in chapter 4, so thank you. Shamanic, personal shamanic work, or do you mean going to see a shaman for treatment?
Or just the whole thing?
The whole thing. Well, I think shamanic work is fantastic. I've been happily bombed out my head for many years. Ayahuasca is always good fun. Certain of the deadly nightshade family can be quite potentially mind-blowing, let alone moving down to more common things like mushrooms and acid. But no, for the right person, I always used to think that psychedelic drugs was a bit like you can either climb up the mountain of awareness a step at a time, or you can take a psychedelic and get a helicopter to the top. The problem is, of course, sometimes a helicopter crashes into the mountain before you get there, and therefore people can sometimes suffer badly. So I think that shamanism is a valid form of understanding and of treatment, and certainly there are other levels of existence. You can't measure them. It doesn't show up necessarily on a scan. But as I said before, we've all got a life force, and the millisecond that you're dead, for opposed to a millisecond before you're alive, something isn't there. And, this isn't quantifiable or reproducible.
And what do you say about supplements? Because the supplements also become so contaminated with external things as well.
Well, that's another great question. I couldn't agree more. Intensive farming, the joy of companies like Monsanto and these sort of people leave a lot to be desired. And also, if you don't nourish the earth, then obviously the vitamin and mineral and nutrient content of the food is going to plummet accordingly. I'm a herbalist, so therefore herbs have micronutrients in them. So therefore, I know that if I give certain herbs, I can look back, and this herb was first used in 220 AD. So it's been used like for virtually 2,000 years continuously, and particularly in the Chinese materia medica, they wrote down what was going on. So we had a midwife, a nurse sister years ago, and she said, any drug she was talking about, but I think it's fair to say any substance or anything that happens that's been on the market for less than 50 years, they don't know the side effects. So therefore, taking minerals and supplements, some people, I'm fairly relaxed about it. If people want to do it, that's fine. But in my opinion, I don't personally advocate that so much because it doesn't have the longevity of use that herbal medicine does.